We got Brandon Dixon, Scottsdale, Arizona's current location. Is that what we just gathered? Right, you're down in AZ for the off season.
Yeah, just putting boxes away, getting stuff settled in our house before we pack up and do it all again to leave for spring training.
Just the life of a ball player. I mean,
Yeah,
that was so simple and understood for you, as in the simplicity of how you just put that is extreme complexity to the rest of the world, I'd say.
yeah, it's constantly moving.
Yeah, just don't get too comfortable, right?
Right,
That would be the essence of
exactly.
it. Well, no,
Yeah,
man. So it's cool, and I'll let you kind of have the floor here and kind of create a little bit of a background for people who are listening. But first and foremost, pumped to have you on. This is so we have Brandon Dixon with us today. I met you, man. We went and saw. Remember we ran into each other. We went and watched you play the Twins. I think it was in August that we kind of shook hands and introduced. Tony Vaca put us together on the side there. Do you
yeah,
remember that?
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that
You
was a
guys were love.
cool day to meet you there, and then kind of circle back and have a podcast, which would be super sweet to just kind of catch up with you and catch up and hear a little bit of things of what you're doing and whatnot. But on top of that, when we went to your game, Tony was heavily into how cool your story was, and so boys being boys, we do the whole video series. We look at some clips. We watch the path. We all sort of vicariously live it out through the guy who's playing. You know how this works. I'm sure you were there
Yeah,
at some point as well.
for sure.
So we do that and get to meet you, and then now to sort of kind of put it all together on a podcast is super cool. So for the listeners, we have Brandon Dixon with us of the Detroit Tigers, getting ready to rock out of Arizona at the end of kind of your off season here, but can you sort of take people through the journey of before you got to the big leagues, just kind of where, because obviously I just mentioned Australia, Arizona, you're from California, play at Detroit. We started off by saying you move all over the place, but just give us a little breakdown of the early goings of Brandon and how sort of how you kind of how life started in the sports world.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Southern California. Just always playing sports, always being outside, doing whatever it was, whether it was surfing, going to the lake with the family, basketball, baseball. So kind of that whole thing. And then went to college out in Arizona, went to Tucson, U of A, and
Oh,
then
nice.
yeah, got drafted by the the Dodgers in 2013, and then kind of bounced around a couple different teams. Got traded to the Reds. A couple years later, got claimed by the Tigers, and yeah, so it's been a quite the journey, but it's been fun.
Absolutely, man. When you were at U of A, what years did you guys win the series one of those years?
Yeah, we won it my sophomore year. So I was there 11, 12, and 13, and
Wow.
then we won it in 12.
Oh, so you were drafted junior year.
Yeah,
No way,
yeah,
dude. So you've got Omaha under the belt too.
yeah, yeah. That's up there with that's in the top couple of baseball moments that I have. That was pretty special.
That is amazing, man. We talked to buddies with LeMahieu. He was on the podcast a little while back, and we talked about how he won the World Series in 10, I think, with LSU. But
Okay.
it's interesting how you say that. Like when you go to Arizona now, you play college baseball at U of A, and that's big time baseball. The fan wise, did you guys have a pretty good? I know a little bit about Arizona. I know Arizona State a little bit. Like I know that you guys are going to have good fans and those sort of things. But is the energy? What's the energy at an Arizona college baseball game?
It was so the year we won it was the first year that we had a stadium off of campus.
Okay,
So it was like I think the old maybe Rockies spring training field. It's called
sure.
High Corbett, and so they were able to sell some beer, and that always brought people in. So that year was the first year that we were averaging a good amount of fans. Where before that, when we were on campus, we weren't really getting too much, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty cool because we were obviously pretty good that year, and then we also had, the community kind of come together, which it was a lot of fun.
See, that's where it's so intriguing to me to try to put myself in the mind of where that was or how you did on that, because you go to Omaha, and to segue it into Omaha, this is what's intriguing to me, is that you play so fast in front of so many people, and there's not many college baseball teams that have that type of energy. That's why I ask, because if you go to LSU, sure, your fans are nuts. Ole Miss fans are nuts. Like you can kind of understand stress or loud crowds or big crowds before Omaha if you play at a certain amount of schools, right? But
Yeah.
then you go to Omaha and there's 25,000 people. You're on national television. You've literally visualized that your entire life, and then you're in it. I don't even know. Can you even get back to that memory and even remember what that was like?
Yeah. I mean, we actually had a series there, or I think maybe just a game to open up the College World Series this last season, and so I kind of got to relive it a little bit.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, I remember just being there because we watched the game
Mm-hmm.
when we first got there, and I was like, holy crap, there are so many people here. But I think like looking back, when you're in the moment and you're playing, and you got your boys next to you, you're not really like, I don't know. I'd never really thought about it until kind of after,
Right.
I would say. But yeah, just that atmosphere, it's pretty special for baseball.
That is wild, man. And you mentioned so you made your debut with the Reds,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
is that sort of comparable to Omaha experience and then major league debut of like during it? So now I guess what is now I'm thinking about is, I can imagine being with your boys in Omaha, because in college you're like our boys. Not that you're not boys in professional sports, but you know that,
Yeah,
right? Like you are
yeah,
boys with your college guys. So I could see that being such a deep rooted in the moment, battling with my dudes. And then you get to the show and you could have, I don't know what your experience was with that, but you could get to the show and know like two guys, on the big
yeah.
league roster or whatnot. What was that? Was that comparable to after your big league debut? Do you look back at the big league debut after it and reflect on it? Or was it very similar in the moment? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was kind of similar, but yeah, kind of like what you touched on. I mean, I went up and I had been in big league spring training, so I knew most of the guys, but I
Okay.
didn't like, with college, you're living with them, you're lifting with them, you're doing, I mean, there were a few guys I had every class with,
Right.
so you're with them 24/7. And then, yeah, I mean, when I got called up, it was a pretty awesome team, and I enjoyed it a lot. But it's a different bond than it is when you're going through kind of 5 a.m. lifts and all that stuff with the guys. So yeah, but I would say it's pretty similar as far as like looking back and just trying to be in the moment. But yeah, a lot of lessons along the way as well.
Oh, tremendously. I mean, I think it's a fine line, right? And I had a conversation with one of my buddies last night who's currently playing sports as well, and it's like this dance, right? And I think it'd be interesting to get your perspective on it. Is how do you demystify something that you've wanted your whole life? Like you kind of see yourself playing Major League Baseball, and then one day you're doing it, which is insane because in a moment's time, you're doing something that you've imagined for so long. But then at the same time, you have a job to do and you need to, what I've just seen, people who do really well, they end up demystifying those moments. Like they can get in there and perform and then digest it later on. But what a tug and pull type, pull and push type deal, where it's like, how do you balance that as a human?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a learning experience. Yeah, I mean, my first year with the Reds, I don't think I did a great job with that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as you get called up, it's your dream come true. Um, but then I was in a bench role, so I'm pinch hitting against the 8-9 relievers,
Yeah.
closers, things like that, getting 4 or 5 at bats a week. and you start to be hard on yourself because you're like, oh, if I don't hit 280, 300, I'm gonna be sent back down, and this is my one chance. And so I did a little bit of that my first year, but I think just from talking to veterans and things like that, you start to get comfortable and realize you're here for a reason. And the I don't know. For me, the less I've cared about results and things like that, the easier it is, because then you're just enjoying where you're at, and then the results start to come.
Yeah, that's that. It's wild, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you, it's wild because it's how do you, I asked this question and this is something I would even want you to go deeper into what you just said because that's remarkable how clear that statement is, right? But it's, if you can not chase what you want, you end up getting what you want, but the key is not chasing it. It's like a wild thing, right? Because you could get up there and go, I got to hit 300, I got to hit 300 because you want that, right? And then you end up chasing that, and then it becomes the exact opposite of what you intended to do, purely just chasing that down. And obviously, it's common that guys jump into the big leagues and have that role, right? Like it's pretty common that your first time up, you're kind of a back-ended pinch hitter type role. Is commonly what I hear from a lot of people. Is that pretty
Yeah.
accurate?
Yeah. For the most part, unless you're, a big time prospect or
Right.
something like that, that's kind of how you get in the door for sure.
Yeah, man, and that can disrupt a lot of things like routines, mentalities, those sort of things. And so when you kind of look at how you've allowed yourself and I know it's still, you're doing it all the time, but how have you allowed yourself to not chase things that you want or again, demystify? I'll just hang on that word for a minute. Like what is the Brandon Dixon internal thing, or do you not even really acknowledge it? Like you just kind of see it for what it is and move through it and just not focus on results.
I mean, I think that's been a process,
Mm-hmm.
but it's for me, it's understanding like my thoughts and where they're coming from, and just trying to break everything down to like its simplest form. So yeah, I mean, if I start to feel pressure or I start putting pressure on myself, it's kind of understanding, okay, like where is this coming from? Why is it a fear that I'm going to get sent back down? Is it um, just trying to understand where it's coming from, and then you can kind of attack it and be like, okay, I can break that down. Like I've been in AAA before. I've done that, and it's really not that bad. And the more you can simplify it and get comfortable where you're at, then you can start to enjoy where you're at, and it can be the dream that it's supposed to be. But um, the bigger you make it, being in the big leagues, things like that, the more stressful it is. Personally, for me, it was. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that is awesome, man. How much of that carries over into everyday life? Like, do you step outside yourself too, just not just in baseball, and sort of look at your simplifying and balancing just relationships, hobbies, what have you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something I do quite a bit. I mean, whether it's just writing stuff down in a journal, or just picking up a book and reading, and just spending some time alone. But yeah, I don't know. That's something I always enjoy, some self reflection and kind of understanding. Okay, my thoughts, what's going on here, and why am I feeling like this?
Absolutely, man. And that, how hard is that in a season? Just because you like for people who are, a lot of people will listen to this that aren't a professional athlete or don't play sports or haven't played baseball for that matter, I suppose. But like you really are moving all over the place. Like you probably forget what day it is a lot.
Oh
and
yeah,
and it is a really weird like time warping theme. And I think that silence or that reflection can be extremely difficult. I mean, how have you, and you've traveled the world now to play baseball, which is amazing. We got to definitely dive into that for a bit. But like, how do you do you ever find yourself getting away from that reflection or that, silent or alone time and be like, oh shoot, I got to bring it back in? Or how have you become aware of how to accomplish that in a season?
I mean, I think that just comes from experience, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely times, family comes to town or you got a bunch of friends in town and you got to kind of entertain some people. But at some point, if you're, you start to feel like, oh, I need to kind of take a step back and kind of reel some things in and just have some time alone and think a little bit on what's going on and things like that. So
Well, and you guys get a lot of pressure for that too, right? I mean, you think family and friend. I mean, that's energy consuming, and so but then you also want to be a good human, and you don't want to always
yeah,
be about baseball and that sort of stuff too. And it's like that I used to always think when I think back to my days, I used to get frustrated when people would come into town, and I would get frustrated that I was frustrated. Like I'd be like,
yeah,
oh man, why don't I hang out with them or whatnot? But it's a thing, right? Do you talk to people about that? Like, do you tell your friends or your family, like, like, did they kind of become aware through that experience too? Because now you've been playing for a while, and obviously college is high stress too. But what have your friends or family kind of taken away from that, and how important is that to have people who recognize what you're trying to do around you?
yeah. I mean, I think they understand. At least the friends and family that are really close.
Yeah,
That they see me, doing the work in the off season and things like that. They realize how important it is, and then also what goes into it. So um, for the most part, my family and they're all very understanding. And if I have time, I'll make it for them. But they don't expect anything when they come to town or anything.
yeah.
So that's always really helpful.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It has to be, right? And so when you kind of go through your journey through the minor leagues and that's what Tony Vaca has he mentioned a lot. So you guys met out in Australia, correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so were you in an organization at the time and that was just winter ball, or what was the background of where you were at in your career? Kind of going through the minors, like what was the
Yeah.
path before the Reds?
So I was with the Dodgers when I went over there.
Okay.
I had just finished, I think, high.
Okay.
And I I think I broke my wrist or either broke my wrist or pulled an oblique at some point during that season. So I missed about a month and a half of at bats. And so the Dodgers kind of came up to me at the end of the season and were like, "Hey, we want you to get at bats in order for you to be able to go to Double A next year."
Uh
So it wasn't really a choice, but it was one of the coolest experiences to be able to go over there and play winter ball, but in a way that you can prepare for the next season. Because I think we were playing maybe 4 days a week, and so the rest of the time you could train, you could hang out at the
yeah.
beach, and get to explore one of the coolest countries I've been to. So it was that was a lot of fun.
Dude, absolutely. That's I think that's what a lot of people say they like about Australia is the schedule isn't because if you're in the Dominican, or have you played in the Dominican or any,
No, I haven't gone to any of the Latin American countries for winter ball yet.
because that's like a big league schedule, right? Don't you play every day there?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so the Australia one is pretty easy on this on the body and that. So that's interesting. So you had to go. Like it was more of a they just told you you're going to go there and play.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I wasn't against it at all,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, they kind of left the choice up to me, but it was, hey, if you don't get these at bats, you're probably going to go back to high A. So it
Oh,
was
sure.
pretty easy choice.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was like I don't know. At some point, I just got married last
Yeah.
month, and I told my wife at some
Nice.
point towards the end of my career, I would love to go back there and play again.
Oh, that's cool, man. Congratulations, by the way. Just a little, guy just got married. I mean, heck, let's have an
Yeah.
off season. Let's
Thank
ride.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so well going in that would be cool, right? Too. I was kind of talking to the Aces at the time. I don't know if there's Melbourne. I learned
Yeah.
very quickly that it's not Melbourne. I used to
Yeah.
say
Not
that.
Melbourne.
I used to say that all the time and just get absolutely hammered by the dude who was talking to me about it. But no, it's a cool thing, man. I sort of wish I would have done that, right? But so to you, California guy, and you mentioned surfing, and I gotta imagine you like the water just from the opening of our conversation. You mentioned lake and surfing, and you're from the West Coast, so the water's got to be a big thing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, every weekend or during summer or whatever, whenever we weren't playing sports, we were at the beach or lake or something.
Dude, that's awesome. So you go, so then you obviously got that kind of vibe, I guess, in Australia. But we talked to a lot of surfers. In fact, when you said that, it jacked me up because I don't know the background of what I do in terms of training is I train guys how to breathe. Very simply, I'm still trying to get better at just saying that in a sense that doesn't sound so simple. But a lot of people that I've learned from is the surfing community, and I don't know how deep you are in with your surfing or those sort of things, but have you ever like what have you noticed about things that you do that sort of train your mind or your body for baseball that isn't baseball? Is that one of them?
I mean, I think it kind of goes into just personal well-being as far as surfing. I mean, I just really enjoy being in the water.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I mean, it's a really good workout after season. If I haven't like swam or done anything and I just go out there, I'm crushed by the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not something I necessarily do just for baseball or like as a training method. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you can take from. I mean, the balance, everything that you do with it, it it all goes back to just being athletic, I think.
Well, for sure, and you got to be in flow. What
Yeah.
I think is so interesting about surfing is that you have no control over the environment. Like you're basically it's like a reactionary thing, right? Now this is coming from someone who is I've surfed I think 3 times in my life. So this is by no this is like the person who studies the book but doesn't live the book, you know. And
Yeah.
so by no means do I have that part of it. But what I think is interesting about it is it's an aerobic thing with your arms before you go out on a wave, and then it's balance with the lower half, and then to be able to control just your body and mind in an environment that you don't know if you're going to get a wave or not, and you don't know what's going to happen. I think that's insane. Like to me, that's so fascinating just to study.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you can get lost out there. I mean, you go out for an hour or two and it feels like you've been out there all day. And yeah, it's just something that, you have no distractions. You got no phone, you got no technology or anything, and you're just out there hanging out, which is it's kind of rare to be able to do something like that.
Oh, and that's where like nature comes in, right?
Yeah.
We're all about getting into the woods. That's kind of my thing on that. But when you do, so what always is interesting to me is hearing what baseball players do in their off season because are you a guy that when the season's over, do you touch a baseball or a bat or do you train right away or do you kind of ease into your off season? Like, is that, I'm just feeding off of thinking about, being lost at sea. How is your sort of protocoling or programming when you're not in season look? How does that look right away?
It's kind of every year it's been a little different. For the most part, I'll take the first month like completely off. I'll do like some lifting if I get bored and really
Yeah.
want to get back into the gym. But this year was a little different because I knew we were going to go on our honeymoon and we were doing kind of an extended honeymoon
Mm.
in December, and it was a little closer to season. So I probably started baseball activity like maybe 10 days after I got back.
Okay.
And so I just wanted to get back into it and then kind of get right before I left for the honeymoon so that, I could come back, figure out my swing, feel like I was still in shape, things like that. So for the most part, I normally take about a month off and do a bit of traveling and things like that. But this year was a little bit different.
Is there? Yeah, absolutely. I could, yeah, obviously. And
Yeah.
when you like, what's the evolution of that thinking, right? Because go back to what you already talked about of not having a result, but then with a swing or figuring out your swing, is that a entirely intuitive result? Like, is there a moment in time as a hitter at your experience where you go, "Yep, that's right," or "I have it"? You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's definitely times where it's like that. For me, like, so I work with a guy back in Orange County, but
Mm-hmm.
basically, like, the whole idea that we're trying to get to is, like, if I'm gonna make my weeks where I'm struggling or like where it doesn't feel right, I want to make those as close as I can to when it is right, you know? So if I can shorten that bandwidth or whatever, and make it just a little bit closer, that's when, you know, the 0 for 20s turn into 0 for 10s or
Mm.
things like that. And you can grind out at bats um, during the course of the season.
Yeah, it's like decreasing your lag time, right? It's like you can have just in general life and you can have a bad week, but as you get older, it's have a bad couple days. And as you get older and get more experience, it doesn't have to necessarily be older. Let's have a bad day. Let's have a bad hour type deal, right?
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
sort of decrease that time. And that's through you've touched a lot on just the simplicity of experience. You know, how much of your off season and intuitively decreasing that lag time, if you will, like how much of that has improved over the years. And if you even can, I don't even know if you can articulate it, but can you even articulate like how you know what you're thinking is right or what you're thinking is okay, I'm thinking that and I know that not to be true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's difficult because, like,
Right.
during season, you go through so many different feels or things that, you know, this feels right, but it might not necessarily be what's really happening.
Mm.
Um, but I think just the more you understand your body and um, the more you have an understanding of what you're trying to do and trying to accomplish, you can kind of cut down on some of the things that in the past you've struggled with. So for me, it's kind of looking back at the season and breaking it
Yeah.
down a little bit.
Yeah.
Where was I successful? Why was I successful during that part? What was I doing to be successful? And that can be swing mechanics, that can be thoughts, that can be, you know, whatever. But breaking that down and then also looking at where was the success not there
Mm.
and why, and just trying to get better at your strengths and then understand your weaknesses a little more.
Well, I think you just answered what I was going to ask next because I was going to ask you that. Do you program it off of the strengths? You know, do you program that off of what did I do really well and how do I do more of that? Or do you look at it as, okay, that's where I struggled. That's what I need to improve this offseason? Because I got to imagine every offseason the goal is to just have a higher level of adaptation, right? Like you're trying to evolve a little bit better, and that's going to change every year just
Yeah.
from anything, you know, just from being married or being older, whatnot, right? And so, do you focus the adaptation through a strength, and I want to do more of that strength, or the adaptation of there's my weakness, and I need to improve that weakness?
I think it's learning how to blend the two.
Mm.
So like for me, just like being able, like when I'm really good as far as hitting, I'm able to pull the ball really well.
Okay.
So it's being able to understand, um, okay, why am I able to do that, and then why do I maybe struggle on the outer half, and then learning how to take those moves and make it feel like I'm pulling the ball in the outer half, or things like that, and trying to blend the two so that it, you know, you can, I don't know,
Be
make your
more complete,
weaknesses.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, just slowly become a better hitter.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, what is the difference? One of the we had a guy on here, a base stealer, and he said something, and I feel like I should know these things, but then you just don't think about them, right? Like he talked about how in the big leagues it was almost harder to steal because of scouting reports, but then it was easier to steal because of scouting reports, right? And
Yeah,
but then I gotta imagine that's the same thing with you, right? Like you gotta when you get into the big leagues, is there a noticeable difference of does the scouting report, I guess, expose your weaknesses that much more, or is it not that big of a difference?
I think there's times where it does.
Mm-hmm.
So like my first year with the Reds, I was just crushing fastballs,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't hit an off-speed pitch to save my life. And so when I made it up with the Tigers, I was just getting nonstop off speed. So I just started
Wow.
sitting on it, and
Yeah.
I started crushing off speed. But like within a month or so, teams start to change and pitch you a little differently. So I think they're more advanced as far as just being able to adapt quicker to what you're doing, rather than like in the minor leagues, they might pitch you off of last year's scouting report for the whole season.
Yeah, that is. I just think that is so intriguing because it is such a chess match up at the top there, right? And so you say an adapt, what do you think as an athlete or a performer for that matter? Because you do have to adapt, right? And it ultimately becomes the better you become at adapting, the more sustainable you are as a performer. And I mean, how do you find? What would you say would even be the breakdown of adaptation?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think just knowing when it's something that you need to make a change,
Yeah.
or knowing when it's I just didn't have it today. Like I just wasn't fully there, and understanding, was it a physical thing or was it a mental thing? And um, I feel like a lot of times it's a mental thing before it's a physical thing. So if you're 0 for 5 and you're gonna rework your entire swing, like I think you're jumping a little too soon. But yeah, I think it's kind of understanding yourself a little bit more.
Yeah, man, and that's subjective, right? That's like the hard part for people to wrap their head around things every now and then is the subjectiveness of performance, because it is like you have to know that, and you're also posed, you're in front of so many different voices. That's what also I think is intriguing to me about people like yourself who can play at high levels of anything, because you got to think like there's no way you even know how many coaches you've had at this point, right? and so
Yeah,
and so it's like you have hitting coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, AAA coach, big league coach, bench coach. And if you're not aware, and you can speak to this deeper, but if you're not aware of your own self-talk or your own thinking or your own awareness to the subjectiveness of performance, I mean, so many other voices are going to have their own opinion, right? And so that
yeah.
could create just chaos, and I got to imagine for playing, how many years have you been playing now professionally? 7?
7.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
2013 is when you jumped in, is that what you said?
yeah.
Yeah, man. So, does that get easier with time to sort of navigate through the chaos of other people's opinions, or do you rely on veterans or people to kind of, do you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely gets easier. But I think I think there's definitely some good in being coachable,
Yeah.
but there's a lot that goes wrong when you are, and that was, I think, coming up, that was something that kind of hurt me. Was, every year I had a different hitting coach, and every year I'd listen.
Right.
And
Oh, that's
so
powerful.
yeah, and over the first 3 or 4 years, every year I was trying something different, rather than just being like, no, like I know how to hit, and yeah, I have things that I need to adjust, but understanding those myself, um, and being able to make the adjustments myself, rather than a hitting coach who spent maybe 30 at bats with me in spring training, and he's trying to overhaul my swing. And just kind of understanding, like, it's okay to say no,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and and do it in a respectful way, but do it because you understand what you're trying to go for and work on.
Well, so I want you to even keep touching on that, because that is so valuable. What you just said is insanely valuable. So I got to imagine you've always been a coachable, right? I mean, it's kind of like
Yeah.
two things, right? You find and you see that, and it's a lot of times you see people who are not coachable at all. I don't want to say it like that, but they have a lot of success because they just do their own thing, they believe in it, and they go, and they can get a bad rep for that, right? And then also, like, to each his own, but then being coachable is powerful, and then you end up being a liked guy, which is a positive thing too, and being a good teammate and everything outside of just the physical aspect of thing. But was there, like, how did you come to be able to say that so clearly? Like, was that a defining thing? Did you realize that in pro ball? Have you had anyone in your corner that sort of mentored you through that perception? Because that is highly, highly important. Is then being able to say no in a positive way, but then continue to work together, right? Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
confidence inside that too. But what made you or got you to be able to say what you just said?
I think having a couple coaches that were able to understand what I was working on and
Yeah,
like why I was at that level, and then being able to make adjustments that worked for me, rather than adjustments that they were trying to push on everybody. And so I think just being around like quality coaches that understood the individual and didn't try and make everything um, the same across the board for everyone, so that I was able to realize like, no, like he can think one way and work on something, and then I can work on something and think one way, and it can work for both of us. It's not a one size fits all. And then just understanding like, at the end of the day, if the results aren't there, if I don't think what I'm doing is going to provide results, like I'm going to be out of a job. So
yeah.
um, I would rather be a little bit selfish or stubborn or whatever the word is, and fail my way than I would just trying to be coachable and fail someone else's way.
Dude, that's awesome. That is awesome. When you take that mentality and you go up to the big leagues, how did you carry that into now you're in the big leagues, right? So now you had a great, you're going back in, just had your second taste in the show, and now you're at a new level, right? Have you noticed how at each level that rises, like what comes with that, but then how do you get better at going your way at a new level?
I mean, I think there's a pressure every year.
Right.
So like my first year with the Reds, I was probably doing the best I'd done in the minor leagues, hitting
Okay.
like 340, 350, and like I said, I went to that bench roll, and I had this big leg kick. My swing was a little bit long, but within 3 or 4 at bats, I was being told I needed to change, and I was okay. That doesn't really make sense, but I want to be here,
Yeah.
and
Whatever it takes.
you,
Right.
yeah, you guys are big league coaches for a reason, so I'm going to trust you, um, and that season just never really turned around for me. It kind of just kept getting worse, and I just realized, at the end of the season, like, okay, I trusted someone with, my dream, and I didn't necessarily agree with it,
Right.
and I just went down that road because I thought, they know more than me. But this past year, I started in AAA. I think I was there for about a week, and then a couple injuries and stuff, and I think I just kind of told myself like, if I'm gonna fail, like I have nothing to lose. I was just in AAA. I only got called up for an injury, so the chances are I'll be the first one back down.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna listen to people that I don't really trust when I've been working all off season on these specific things. So yeah, and then I kind of took off for a little bit and then started to struggle at the end of the year. But it was it was a much more comforting year because I was doing it my own way,
Yeah.
and I believed in what I was doing, and I think that's like the biggest thing, if you don't believe what you're doing, like if you don't think it's right and you're still doing it, like you're you're gonna fail eventually.
Yeah, and you'll even find ways to make it a problem, right? Because
Yeah,
even if you're working in it, it's just not. It's not. It's we get tossed around. I think we'll tailor it towards baseball, but all of life, right? Like we have. Think about how many conversations in a week you'll have with people. You'll probably have a conversation with somebody today that centers around purpose, and you'll obviously have it with us, but like people are always looking for how do I have intent or purpose or passion in what I'm doing. And I don't know the answer to that. I just think of it as, if you believe in what you're doing, it's typically right because in your head it's right, and so
yeah,
to be able to quantify that, I don't know if it's necessarily possible, but I do think, I guess I do believe, if you will, that if you are doing a swing, if you're changing up a swing and being a high performer, high stress, high pressure moments, like you're going to work as hard as you can at that, but then you take so many steps back because you're doing all these reps with no intention. And I've
yeah,
always thought of it as how simple it is. In baseball, we use the term intention, which is great, right? But or have intent, and I get that, and I know obviously I'm sure you do too. We understand that, but how could you ever understand intention if you don't fully know like what you're struggling for or what you're trying to enhance or what you're trying to do for yourself? I don't know how you'd be able to do that. And again, that's where the subjectivity comes to all the performance, right? And I don't know, that was just me thinking through what you were just saying.
yeah, for sure, definitely.
It's do you what's the when you were going through the big leagues this year and sort of playing, because you kind of got out of that pinch hitter role, right, with Detroit? You were more so
Yeah,
you were all in that situation. How does that settle into a position where you get into the big leagues for a little bit and you do struggle but you don't freak out? You know what I mean?
yeah.
What's that
Um,
transition like?
well, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of freedom and
Yeah.
realize, if I go 0 for today, like I still am probably going to be in the lineup tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's, that gives you a little bit of freedom and a little bit of comfort. But I think, yeah, I think just being able to just throughout the course of a season to go through those struggles and failures, whatever it is, and be content where you're at, and not continuing to chase, that 300 or
Yeah.
whatever you're chasing, and just take it a day at a time.
That's awesome, man. What if I take you all the way back to the beginning of the path of baseball? I mean, have you always, when you were a little boy, like was this the whole thing, right? Or is it always? What was your focus levels like growing up and disciplines, I suppose, of chasing down Major League Baseball? Obviously, you're in it, and hopefully healthy and good long career and sustainable and all the great things that come with that. But, have you always sort of taken the path of I'm going to do this, or you know what I mean with that?
Yeah, I think when I was growing up, I wanted to be in the NBA before I wanted to play
Right on.
baseball,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I had a terrible jump shot and I wasn't super tall, and yeah, I mean I could play defense, but that was about
Yeah, you
it.
had a lot of
So
heart. Yeah,
yeah, had
dove
a
for the
lot of
loose
heart.
balls. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that pretty much kind of ended itself eventually, but yeah, I mean, I always played baseball and I enjoyed it. And then kind of in high school, I it just kind of became a passion for me, and
Yeah.
I really started to grow in it and want to get better and things like that. And I think I understood that through playing basketball, through playing football, and realizing that's not really where I wanted to go.
Sure.
And then, yeah, I mean, just continued to get better, but it was never something I was just like head and shoulders better than anyone.
Hmm.
I I got a scholarship to Arizona because pretty much I had a good tournament in Arizona. I think we were in Tucson playing in high school, and I hit a home run on like a major league size field,
Oh yeah.
and and I got offered like that night, but like I wasn't like a highly recruited guy or anything like that. And it's been a process. Even in college, I mean, I struggled my first 2 years and then kind of figured it out my junior year. But yeah, it's been a constant grind and struggle. But it's been something that's been a lot of fun to learn on the way.
Well, that's why I asked. It's kind of fun to hear you speak and then go, okay, like how did you get to think like that, and so there's got to be something along the lines of like that, right? The recruitment side, or you just have found ways to you've had to have found ways to believe in yourself, right? And then you take all these, you get tossed around all over the place, and you just kind of figure out what you're doing and how you're trying to do it, and then get to that place, and then go get it, and that's why I was curious, were you like a no doubter, this is what I want to do in my life, is I want to play in the big leagues, and then kind of hear your story. It's a wild thing, but you've obviously found some cool things to do with it. And as I kind of take that and funnel it in, we always have our final piece. We call it the diamond series, baseball diamond analogy, if you will. But we always ask our guests, if we think about it, we've forgotten the last few times. I don't know why, but we got to get better at remembering this. But when we get to this place, we basically ask everyone on our team, and it started out with our podcast, we would always ask, what's your purpose, your standards, your systems, and your vision for being just a human. And so when I take it down, simplify for you, when you think about yourself, get outside of baseball and just kind of look at yourself, of just how simply you put together your journey and where you're at now. When you look at your life, recently married, and obviously Tony Vaca is one of my best friends, so anyone who rides with Vaca is obviously probably going to be a cool dude. And when you think about, what's your purpose towards the way you identify yourself as a human, or a service to other people, or just things that you're willing to struggle for, right now in the moment, can you sort of piece together what's your why, of why you are doing what you're doing, and what kind of sustains your passion and discipline to keep improving?
Yeah, I mean, that's
It's deep.
deep, but
It's not shallow. Yeah, no, I got you.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, like, I think my faith comes first, and
Yeah.
then, I just, I really enjoy just getting better, whatever it is, like developing and growing. So whether that's in my faith, or with being a husband now, or just in baseball, the performance side, like what you guys do.
Yeah.
So it's something that I just thoroughly enjoy, seeing how good I can be at whatever I'm working on. And I think baseball or not, like, that's something that I think I'll do and carry throughout life, just because it's something that I like to see how good I can be at whatever I'm working on. So
Yeah.
yeah, just breaking things down and trying to simplify it, and then understanding, okay, what makes the greatest tick, or how did they get there, or what do they know that other people don't. So just kind of, I would say, in general, just being the best version of me.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. I love it. It's what else would we do, right? I mean, what else would we? I've never understood why we wouldn't try to do that.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of our duty to ourselves, is to see what we're capable of. That's awesome, man. Well said. And when you take that down, keep as Dave Fisher, who's a main guy, one of the main guys with MindStrong, he plays hockey over in Austria. He always tells people to put your floaties on when you go around the bases on the Diamond Series, because it is deep. So when you stay on that same path, and you sort of think about your values or your standards as a human, mentally, emotionally, physically, what puts you in a place to continue to push to see what you're capable of, because you have done amazing things, and that's awesome, and that aligned us to kind of connect to the podcast, which I'm super pumped for in general. But I mean, more so, you're just a human that's trying to see what you can do on your own, and that's super cool, right? And so without having to know you deeply, I'm not oblivious to the fact that you've had probably insane amount of adversities and struggles that it took and still will take, right? But you've obviously found some standards and created some substance and some habitual things in your life, mentally, emotionally, and physically, that give you the ability to improve and simplify. So when you go through a day of your own, what does that look like? Whether that's morning, night, during the day, like what are some of the things that you have to mentally check off, physically check off? Obviously, you mentioned faith, in that sort of, and emotionally check off. What are the things that you have to check off, and that gives you the best opportunity to, have the best behaviors to continue to improve?
I think I have a decent routine. I mean, it's I don't necessarily do everything every morning, but like an ideal morning is, make breakfast, have some coffee, and I'll do a Bible study, and then I'll read, whether that's, I kind of read a few different areas. So I enjoy some philosophy, things like that, like thinking stuff.
Yeah.
And then I enjoy, something as far as like performance, or like, I think right now I'm reading like Why We Sleep or something.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Or, just things like that. So I enjoy reading, and then, write a little bit, sometimes take the dog for a walk, just, I don't know, whatever it is. If I'm by the beach, definitely go to the beach, hang out there a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think making sure I get some personal time, or do something to just be able to reflect a little bit. I think that kind of sets me up for the day, going forward.
Yeah, man, it just gets your juices flowing. Well, that's where you've talked a lot about. I can see that, right? Because you've talked a lot about believing in yourself and intuitively knowing your feel and understanding yourself and having experience. Well, I mean, a large majority of that comes down to exposing yourself to thinkings and thought patterns and thought experiments. I look like one of the reasons why we just press play on the pod. I literally just looked. We've been talking for 50. I feel like we've been talking for 10 minutes now that I think about it, but we've been talking for a long time now, and it's the reason why I like press and play is that it's just kind of intuitive. It's kind of you as a whole, right? So, if you set yourself up like that, you give yourself the opportunity to see what you think you're capable of, which now if you're going to act on that, you believe in it, hopefully, right? And
Yeah.
so when you think about the philosophy part of it, are you into Stoicism at all, like the Seneca?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've read Meditations. I've
Yeah.
read all of Ryan Holiday's stuff. So a
Oh,
little bit
yeah.
of that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we could probably just have a whole nother podcast on that side of it. Yeah, we're all about the stoicism, so that's beautiful.
Nice.
Well, so when you kind of round it up here, man, and you go through your vision, and this is kind of the finale of thinking of, when you go forward, right? And obviously, as a fan of yours now, and to be able to, I think it's so cool that you gave us the time, but more so, just to hear stories from you and then be able to break it down and hear it from you is really cool. So I obviously wish you the best. But as you move forward in sports and in life, and now that you're a husband and those sort of things, what is the carrot out in front of you that excites you? What's sort of the vision that you not necessarily need to know necessarily or have is super clear, but what's sort of the thing that you're chasing that is very important to you in the future? What's your vision moving forward?
Um, I don't really know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think as far as everything goes, I think just like being content where I'm at. Because I've been in the big leagues and not enjoyed it, and I've been in the big leagues and enjoyed it. So I think having that a good relationship with my wife, and just like having a quality life. So, I mean, whether that is baseball or after baseball or whatever, I mean, there's no point to being the best baseball player if you're not happy doing it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think just like figuring that out, that's I think the main key. There's no point to anything that you do if you and the people around you aren't enjoying it.
That's awesome, man. That'll be good. I mean, it's cool to hear. I've selfishly, the benefit I get on these is I get to hear that live, and it's powerful. But it'd be cool for a lot of people to hear that, And so, I don't know, man. It's a cool, well said. It was really enjoyable to talk to you. I mean, we haven't spoke, so to be able to have a conversation and get to know you, it's really cool, man. I really appreciate you. First and foremost, I appreciate you giving away the time, dude, and just in being able to talk with us and jump on the podcast. That is super cool. I think that's the highest quality of leadership any of us can have, is giving away that time. And so for you to do that is on its own very grateful for that, and I appreciate you chopping it up with us. And I know that, like anything, right, the people who are listening, they'll get a lot out of that too. And you did that for myself, and we don't even know who will listen. So, who knows what it'll help. But it's cool, and I appreciate you doing that, like I said. So from my end and the rest of the MindStrong team, thanks for the time, dude. And well said. Just really cool answers. I'm a fan of Brandon Dixon.
No, thank you. I appreciate what you guys do too. So, yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Absolutely, man. Hey, enjoy the rest of the off season. I know these are crucial times for you before you head out. So good luck this year, but enjoy the newlywed life and your time off in that sun for a bit, and then best of luck this year. We'll be watching.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, sir, brother. I will talk to you soon. Enjoy your day.
All right, you too.
Cheers.
Cheers.